Bilbo must return down the tunnel, for the dwarfs demand to know what is discovered, and more importantly, they've sent him to retrieve treasure. That was the bargain. On his second descent, Bilbo converses with Smaug, engaging in a battle of riddles and wits that's far more dangerous than his game with Gollum. Dragons are ancient, cunning, and their words carry power. They can plant doubt and suspicion with subtle suggestions. Bilbo is careful never to give his real name, for names have power, and instead identifies himself with riddling titles: Barrel Rider, Clue Finder, Webcutter, and Lucky Number, referring to his role as the 14th member of the company. Smaug is intrigued by these riddles, piecing together Bilbo's journey, but also growing suspicious about who sent him. During their conversation, Bilbo notices something crucial: a bare patch on Smaug's left breast, where the armor of his scales is incomplete. Dragons in their youth lie upon their treasure hoards, and gems and gold fragments stick to their soft underbellies, creating armor over time. But Smaug has one spot where a large hollow exists, unprotected by jewels or scales, a weakness in his otherwise impenetrable hide. Bilbo mentions this vulnerability to the dwarfs, never imagining that his words are overheard by a thrush, one of the old breed of thrush that can understand human speech and live to great ages. The thrush flies immediately to Lake Town with this vital information. Smaug's rage at the theft and the audacity of the burglar consumes him. He knows the dwarfs are involved. Bilbo's riddles made that clear, and he knows they must have come from Lake Town with that city's aid. Dragons hold grudges absolutely, and Smaug decides to destroy Lake Town entirely, to burn it to the waterline and kill everyone there as punishment for daring to help his enemies. He bursts from the mountain in the night, wings spreading wide, fire gathering in his throat, and flies toward the long lake with murder in his heart. The sky lights red with his approach, and the people of Lake Town see death coming on dragon wings. Bard the bowman is a descendant of Girion, the last lord of Dale, and he's one of the few men in Lake Town who took the dwarf's quest seriously, who believed the old songs might come true. When Smaug attacks, Bard organizes the defense, though arrows bounce uselessly off the dragon's armored hide. The thrush lands on Bard's shoulder and speaks to him in the language of Dale, which Bard, as Girion's heir, understands, telling him of the bare patch on Smaug's breast. Bard has one arrow left, a black arrow that's been in his family for generations, passed down from his ancestors who fought dragons in ancient times. He places this arrow on his bow and waits for his moment. As Smaug swoops low, gloating and breathing fire onto the wooden buildings, Bard sees the bare patch and looses his arrow. It strikes true, piercing Smaug's heart, and the great dragon falls from the sky, crashing into Lake Town with such force that he sinks half the city beneath the waves. Smaug the Terrible, the greatest calamity of the age, is dead, killed by a single well-placed arrow and information carried by a bird. The people of Lake Town are devastated by the destruction but also freed from the dragon's shadow, and they immediately begin thinking about the treasure under the mountain, the gold that's now unguarded, the wealth that by ancient right should help rebuild what the dragon destroyed inside the mountain. The dwarfs hear Smaug's departure and, after waiting anxiously, descend into the treasure chamber when the dragon doesn't return. They walk through halls carved by their ancestors, seeing the craftsmanship of their people from centuries ago. Pillars shaped like trees, arches carved with leaves and flowers, chambers vast enough to hold armies. The treasure chamber itself overwhelms them, gold piled to the ceiling, jewels scattered like pebbles, artifacts of incredible workmanship lying forgotten in heaps. Thorin searches for the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, a great jewel that is the symbol of kingship for the dwarfs of Erebor, more precious to him than all the other treasure combined. The Arkenstone is described as a globe of crystal, seemingly white in darkness, but when light falls upon it, it reflects light in 1,000 colors, glowing from within as if it contained living fire. It was discovered deep in the mines beneath the mountain, a natural wonder that the dwarfs shaped and polished until it became the most beautiful jewel in Middle-earth. Thorin's grandfather, Thror, valued it above everything else in his hoard, and Thorin considers it his birthright, the symbol that proves his claim to the kingdom. Finding it becomes an obsession, driving him to search through mountains of gold, throwing aside priceless artifacts in his hunt for this one particular treasure. Bilbo finds the Arkenstone before Thorin does. During his own wanderings through the hoard, and he recognizes it from Thorin's descriptions. But something stops him from revealing his discovery, perhaps the ring's influence, making him possessive of beautiful things, or perhaps some deeper wisdom that whispers this jewel might be needed later, that having it gives him leverage, insurance against an uncertain future. He slips the Arkenstone into his pocket, and when Thorin asks if anyone has seen it, Bilbo stays silent. This secret feels heavier than the ring itself, a betrayal of trust that Bilbo justifies by telling himself he'll reveal it at the right moment. When the time is right, news of Smaug's death spreads quickly, carried by birds and messengers. The Elven King hears and marches from Mirkwood with an army, intending to claim a share of the treasure. The men of Lake Town, led by Bard, march north to demand compensation for their destroyed city, arguing that Girions heir has a rightful claim to a portion of the dragon's hoard. Both armies arrive at Erebor to find the dwarfs have blocked the front gate with a makeshift wall of treasure, barricading themselves inside. Thorin, who has found armor and weapons in the hoard, refuses to negotiate, refuses to share even a single coin until the Arkenstone is found. The dragon sickness has taken him, the same madness that afflicted his grandfather, a greed and possessiveness that gold-lust brings to those who sit too long on dragon hoards. Thorin sends a raven to the Iron Hills, where his cousin Dain rules a prosperous dwarf kingdom. The message asks for aid, for warriors to come and defend the mountain against these armies that demand tribute. Dain marches with 500 dwarf soldiers, well-armed and seasoned fighters, intending to break the siege and help Thorin hold the mountain. Meanwhile, Bilbo watches the tension build, the three armies, elves, men, and dwarfs, facing each other before the mountain, ready for war over treasure that none of them helped to win, that was already stolen from its original owners, that has brought nothing but grief to everyone who's touched it. And in his pocket, the Arkenstone weighs heavy, the one thing that might prevent bloodshed, if only Bilbo has the courage to reveal it. Bilbo makes a choice that goes against every instinct of loyalty he possesses. He sneaks out of the mountain under cover of darkness, wearing the ring to remain invisible, and he takes the Arkenstone to the camp of Bard and the Elven King. He offers them the jewel as a bargaining chip, something they can use to negotiate with Thorin, for surely the Dwarf King will trade a portion of the treasure for the stone he values above all else. It's an act of profound courage and wisdom, though Thorin will see it as the ultimate betrayal. Bilbo knows he's ending his friendship with the dwarfs, but he cannot stand by and watch armies destroy each other over gold when he holds the means to prevent it. Gandalf reappears at this crucial moment, having completed his business in the south, business that involved attacking Dol Guldur and driving out the necromancer, though this is barely mentioned in The Hobbit. Years later, Tolkien would reveal that the necromancer was Sauron, and Gandalf's absence during the quest was because he was fighting a war against the Dark Lord. But in this story, Gandalf simply returns, offering counsel to Bard and supporting Bilbo's brave decision to trade the Arkenstone for peace. When morning comes, Bard approaches the mountain and offers to exchange the Arkenstone for Bilbo's promised share of the treasure, 1/14 of the total. As was originally agreed, Thorin is torn between his desire for the Arkenstone and his rage at what he sees as theft and betrayal. He agrees to pay Bilbo's share in exchange for the stone, but he demands time to gather the gold and gems, sending messengers to hurry Dain's arrival. Thorin suspects, correctly, that once he has the Arkenstone, he might not need to honor any bargain, that with Dain's forces he can simply take what he wants. The gold lust has consumed him completely, transforming the noble leader who began this quest into something smaller and meaner, a king in name but a hoarder in spirit, willing to betray his word for the sake of treasure. But before the standoff can resolve into bloodshed, a new threat emerges from the north, goblins and wargs, an army led by Bolg of the North, son of Azog, who was killed in the great battle of Azanalbiza years before. The goblins have learned of Smaug's death and the treasure lying unguarded, and they march in vast numbers to claim it for themselves. The goblin army numbers in the thousands, far outnumbering the combined forces of elves, men, and dwarfs. Suddenly, the three armies that were ready to fight each other must unite against a common enemy, or all will perish. This is the battle of 5 armies, goblins and wargs against elves, men, and dwarfs. The battle is desperate and chaotic, fought on the valley floor before the mountain and on the slopes of Erebor itself. The goblins attack in waves, disciplined and fierce, while the wargs circle and harass the flanks. The elves fight with bows and swords, their movements graceful but deadly. The men of Laketown, though poorly equipped after the dragon's destruction of their city, fight with the courage of those defending their homes and families. Dane's dwarf warriors hold the center line, their heavy armor and axes making them nearly unmovable. But the goblins have numbers, and slowly the defenders are pushed back, forced to give ground, fighting a retreating battle toward the mountain itself. Thorin, watching from the mountain, sees his allies struggling and something breaks in him. Either the gold lust finally releases its grip, or his pride as a warrior overcomes his greed. He dons the ancient armor of his ancestors, taking up weapons forged in elder days, and he leads a sortie from the mountain, charging into the goblin forces with Fili, Kili, and Dwalin at his side. They fight toward Bolg himself, attempting to kill the goblin leader and break the army's morale. It's a desperate, heroic charge, and for a moment it succeeds. The goblins fall back, confused by this sudden counterattack, and hope rises that the battle might turn. But Thorin and his companions are too few, and they've pushed too deep into the enemy forces. Goblins surround them, cutting them off from support, and they make their stand on a spur of the mountain called Ravenhill. Fili and Kili die defending their uncle. The young dwarfs who laughed and joked at the beginning of the quest now fallen in battle, their golden hair stained with blood. Thorin himself is mortally wounded by Bolg before Byrn arrives, having traveled from his hall when he heard of the battle. Byrn in bear form is a force of nature, smashing through goblin ranks, and he kills Bolg with his bare hands, avenging Thorin and breaking the goblin command. The eagles arrive again, tipping the balance decisively. The great eagles, including the Lord of the Eagles himself, swoop down on the goblins from above, attacking with beak and talon. The combined assault from ground and sky is too much for the goblin army, and they break, fleeing back toward the mountains with the victorious alliance pursuing them. The battle of 5 armies is won, but the cost is terrible. Hundreds lie dead on the field, the valley is scarred with battle, and Thorin Oakenshield, king under the mountain, lies dying on Ravenhill, asking to speak with Bilbo one final time. Bilbo finds Thorin lying on the mountainside, the dwarf king's armor dented and blooded, his breath coming in gasps. Thorin asks Bilbo's forgiveness for his harsh words and his greed, acknowledging that Bilbo tried to prevent needless death, that the Hobbit was wiser than he. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, Thorin says, it would be a merrier world. These are his last words, a rejection of the dragon sickness that consumed him, a recognition that Bilbo's simple hobbit wisdom, valuing comfort, friendship, and growing things over gold, was right all along. Thorin dies reconciled with Bilbo, and is laid to rest deep within the mountain, the Arkenstone placed upon his breast, returning the heart of the mountain to the king who valued it too much. Fili and Kili are buried beside Thorin, and Dane, son of Nain, becomes the new king under the mountain, ruling the restored kingdom of Erebor. The treasure is divided according to the agreements. Bard receives a significant portion, which he uses to rebuild Dale and compensate the people of Laketown. The Elven King takes his share, along with the emeralds he particularly desired. Bilbo is offered his 14th share, but looking at the gold, thinking of the lives it cost, he asks only for 2 small chests, one of gold, one of silver, as much as a pony can carry. Even this makes him fabulously wealthy by Shire standards, but it's a tiny fraction of what he was promised, and no one can say he's greedy or grasping. The journey home takes Bilbo back through all the lands he traversed on the way to the mountain, but everything feels different now. He's changed, and the world seems both smaller and larger than it did before. He travels with Gandalf, and Byrn accompanies them part of the way, ensuring their safety through the dangerous lands near Mirkwood. Byrn has become a great chief since the Battle of 5 Armies, his hall a center of power, and the lands between the mountains and Mirkwood are now safer under his protection. Bearn's people, whether there are other skin changers or simply those who follow him, keep the mountain passes open and the goblin numbers down, making the journey easier for travelers. They stop again at Rivendell, where Elrond welcomes them and asks to hear the full tale of their adventures. Bilbo stays there for a while, resting in that peaceful house, recovering from the trauma of battle and the loss of friends. The elves listen to his story with interest and sadness, for they've seen many such tales over the ages, quests for treasure that end in triumph and tragedy mixed together, heroes who achieve their goals but lose themselves in the process. Bilbo sings a song he's composed about his adventures, trying to capture in words what he experienced, though he knows no song can truly convey what he's lived through. The journey from Rivendell back to the Shire takes Bilbo through the lands where he encountered the trolls. Bert, Tom, and William still stand as stone statues exactly where they turned to stone over a year ago. They are unchanged, frozen in their final argument, and birds nest in the crevices of their stone bodies. Bilbo and Gandalf retrieve some of the gold the trolls had stolen and buried, gold that Bilbo adds to his treasure, though he notes ruefully that he seems to have become fond of treasure despite himself. The ring lies heavy in his pocket, though he rarely thinks about it consciously. It's just there, his secret, his precious birthday present that he never mentions to anyone. As they approach the Shire, Gandalf tells Bilbo something important. You are not the Hobbit that you were. It's a gentle way of saying that Bilbo has changed fundamentally, that the comfortable, respectable Hobbit who left Bag End no longer exists. The Bilbo returning home has killed a giant spider, riddled with a dragon, walked through goblin tunnels in darkness, given away a king's ransom for the sake of peace, and witnessed the death of friends. These experiences have marked him in ways that can never be undone, and while he's returning to the Shire, he'll never quite fit there again the way he once did. Bilbo arrives at Bag End to discover an auction in progress. His cousins the Sackville Bagginses are selling off his possessions. He's been gone for over a year, and without any word from him, he was declared presumed dead. His furniture, his mother's dishes, his clothes, everything is being sold to the highest bidder. Some items have already been distributed, and Bilbo spends years tracking down his spoons and other belongings, though some he never recovers. The Sackville Bagginses are particularly disappointed to see him alive, for they'd hoped to inherit Bag End, and now their hopes are dashed. Bilbo's reputation in the Shire is forever altered. He's no longer considered respectable. Respectable hobbits don't go on adventures, don't consort with wizards and dwarfs, don't disappear for over a year and return with tales of dragons. The other hobbits view him with suspicion and disapproval, and he's no longer invited to important social events. But Bilbo finds he doesn't particularly mind. He's seen mountains and dragons, walked through elven halls and dwarf kingdoms, and the petty social concerns of the Shire seem small by comparison. He settles back into Bag End, but he's changed, and he knows it. Bilbo begins writing his memoirs, setting down the tale of his adventure in a red leather book. He's always been fond of writing and poetry, and now he has a story worth telling. He entitles it There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday, with by Bilbo Baggins written on the spine. The book becomes his project for years, refining the story, adding poems and songs, creating a record of everything that happened. This book will eventually become part of the Red Book of Westmarch, the chronicle that contains the history of the great events of the Third Age. Though Bilbo doesn't know this yet, only the dwarfs and elves remain truly friendly with Bilbo after his return. Balin visits him occasionally, bringing news from the Lonely Mountain. The kingdom prospers under Dane's rule. Dale is rebuilt and thriving, and trade flows through Lake Town again as it did in the old days. The gold that cost so many lives now does good in the world, rebuilding what was destroyed, feeding the hungry, restoring prosperity to the north. Balin tells Bilbo that his name is honored among the dwarfs, that songs are sung of his deeds, that he's remembered as a friend of the dwarfs, and the King Gandalf visits periodically as well, smoking his pipe on Bilbo's doorstep and telling tales of the wider world. The wizard values Bilbo's friendship, for he sees in the Hobbit something rare: courage without ambition, kindness without expectation of reward, wisdom that comes from a simple love of good things. Gandalf never asks about the ring directly, though Bilbo suspects the wizard knows he found something magical in the goblin tunnels. Bilbo keeps the ring secret, never telling anyone about it, hardly even acknowledging to himself how much he treasures it, how reluctant he would be to part with it. The years pass peacefully in the Shire, and Bilbo ages more slowly than hobbits normally do, the ring's influence, though he doesn't realize it. He remains comfortable at Bag End, writing his book, gardening, entertaining the occasional visitor who can tolerate his eccentric reputation. He learns to live with being considered odd, with being whispered about by his neighbors, with the knowledge that he's seen wonders they'll never see and paid prices they'll never understand. He's wealthy beyond any hobbit's dreams, but the treasure he values most is his memories, of mountains and starlight, of companions brave and true, of a dragon's treasure and a king's final words, of a world vast and strange that lies just beyond the borders of the quiet Shire. The Hobbit was originally published as a standalone children's book with no plans for a sequel, but readers immediately wanted to know what happened next. The publisher contacted Tolkien asking for more about The Hobbit, and Tolkien began working on what he thought would be another light-hearted adventure. But as he wrote, the story grew darker and more complex, influenced by the ring's true nature, which he was discovering as he wrote. What began as a sequel to a children's book became The Lord of the Rings, a work that would take him 12 years to complete and would transform the ring from a simple magical trinket into the most dangerous object in Middle-earth. Tolkien later revised The Hobbit's chapter Riddles in the Dark to align it with The Lord of the Rings' darker portrayal of the ring and its corrupting influence. In the original 1937 version, Gollum offers to give Bilbo the ring as a prize if Bilbo wins the riddle game, and when he can't find it, he shows Bilbo the way out as a consolation. In the revised 1951 version, Gollum is more sinister, never intending to help Bilbo, and the ring's loss makes him murderous rather than merely disappointed. Tolkien cleverly explained this discrepancy within the story itself. The first version was what Bilbo told people had happened, a lie to make himself seem less like a thief and to hide how precious the ring was to him. The book was illustrated in its first edition by Tolkien himself, who was an accomplished artist as well as a writer. He created maps, drew images of the Lonely Mountain, designed the dust jacket, and crafted runes for the book. Tolkien was meticulous about every detail of presentation, insisting on specific colors and layouts. The map of the Lonely Mountain included hidden moon runes that could only be read when held up to light, mimicking the magic in the story itself. His attention to these details helped make Middle-earth feel authentic and lived in, a place that existed independently of the story. The Hobbit influenced an entire genre of fantasy literature that followed. Before Tolkien, fantasy stories were often fairy tales or mythological retellings, but The Hobbit demonstrated that fantasy could be a serious literary endeavor with its own internal consistency and depth. Tolkien created languages first, then built a world to house them, developing a mythology that stretched back thousands of years before the events of the book. This depth made Middle-earth feel real in ways that other fantasy settings didn't, and it established a template that countless authors would follow. The concept of the hero's journey, as defined by Joseph Campbell, fits Bilbo's adventure perfectly. He leaves his comfortable ordinary world, crosses a threshold into the unknown, faces trials and temptations, experiences a symbolic death and rebirth, and returns home transformed. Bilbo begins as a figure of comedy, fainting at the mention of dragons, and ends as someone who can face down Smaug in conversation and make moral choices that prevent war. This transformation happens gradually, realistically, as Bilbo discovers courage he didn't know he possessed. His heroism isn't about physical strength but about moral courage and quick thinking. The book's themes resonate across cultures and generations: the danger of greed and its power to corrupt even the noble, the value of mercy and how small acts of kindness ripple through history, the idea that ordinary people can change the world, and the bittersweet nature of success that comes at great cost. Thorin achieves his goal of reclaiming Erebor but loses his life and his nephews in the process. Bilbo succeeds in his quest but returns home a stranger in his own land. Victory is never clean or simple, and this complexity elevates The Hobbit beyond simple adventure into something deeper. The riddle game between Bilbo and Gollum draws on ancient traditions of riddle contests found in Norse mythology and Anglo-Saxon literature, sources Tolkien knew intimately as a scholar. Riddles in these traditions were serious business, often with life or death stakes, and they required not just cleverness but knowledge of language, culture, and nature. Some of the riddles in the book are Tolkien's own invention, while others are based on traditional riddles he would have known from his studies. The riddle game serves multiple purposes. It showcases Bilbo's wit, introduces the ring, and creates tension without requiring combat. Tolkien dedicated The Hobbit to his children, but he also wrote it for himself. He delighted in creating Middle-earth, in working out the details of Hobbit culture and dwarf customs, in imagining what a dragon might say or how goblins might speak. The joy of creation permeates the book, and readers sense this pleasure in the prose. Tolkien's academic work on Beowulf and other Old English texts clearly influenced the book. Smaug shares characteristics with the dragon in Beowulf, lying on a hoard and attacking when a cup is stolen, and the riddle game echoes contests of wit found throughout medieval literature. The book's ending is deliberately low-key. There's no grand celebration, no triumphant parade. Bilbo simply returns home, reclaims his house, and settles back into quiet life, forever changed but outwardly similar to how he began. This understated conclusion reflects Tolkien's own sensibilities. He'd fought in World War I, experienced trauma and loss, and understood that soldiers returning from war can never truly come home the same way they left. The Shire remains peaceful and unchanged, but Bilbo carries his memories and his grief, his experiences setting him apart from his neighbors who never left their comfortable lives. Tolkien continued expanding Middle-earth's history throughout his life, writing the Silmarillion, unfinished tales, and countless notes about the Elder Days, the Second Age, and the peoples and languages of his invented world. The Hobbit was his entry point into this mythology, the story that made Middle-earth accessible to readers and that funded his ability to continue writing about it. Without The Hobbit's success, The Lord of the Rings might never have been published, and modern fantasy literature would look radically different. That single sentence written on a blank exam paper, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," changed literature forever. The publication history of The Hobbit reflects changing times and tastes. The first American edition was published by Houghton Mifflin in 1938, just a year after the British release, and the book quickly found an audience on both sides of the Atlantic. During World War II, paper shortages meant fewer copies could be printed, but demand remained strong, and by the 1950s, the book was established as a children's classic. The 1960s brought a paperback boom and unauthorized American editions that prompted Tolkien to authorize an official paperback, which introduced The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to a whole new generation of readers, particularly college students. The relationship between hobbits and tobacco, or pipeweed as they call it in the Shire, is one of Tolkien's humorous touches that makes the fantasy world feel grounded and real. Bilbo's fondness for a pipe, the various blends grown in the South Farthing, and the comfort associated with a good smoke after dinner all reflect Tolkien's own enjoyment of pipe tobacco. These domestic details, concern about handkerchiefs, proper meal times, the importance of tea, make hobbits relatable despite living in a fantasy world. They are essentially Edwardian English country folk transplanted into Middle-earth, and this familiarity helps readers connect with Bilbo's extraordinary journey. The meals in The Hobbit reflect Hobbit culture beautifully: breakfast, second breakfast, elevensies, luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper if possible. When the dwarfs arrive at Bag End, they consume alarming quantities of cakes, tea, coffee, ale, eggs, cold chicken, pickles, cheese, and more, much to Bilbo's dismay. This focus on food and comfort isn't frivolous. It establishes what Bilbo is giving up when he joins the quest, and what he longs for during the hungry, uncomfortable journey through Mirkwood. Food represents safety, home, civilization. Everything adventure requires him to abandon temporarily. Tolkien's professional expertise shaped every aspect of The Hobbit's creation. As a philologist specializing in Old and Middle English, he understood how languages evolve, how place names carry history, and how culture embeds itself in words. The name Baggins sounds appropriately English and Hobbit-like, while Oakenshield carries the weight of dwarvish tradition and warrior culture. Even small details like the Matham House where hobbits store unwanted gifts reflect Tolkien's knowledge of Old English mathom, meaning treasure. This linguistic authenticity extends throughout Middle-earth, making it feel like a place with genuine history rather than an invented fantasy setting. The dragon Smaug represents one of the finest dragon characters in literature, combining the traditional dragon attributes, greed, fire, immense power, with personality and intelligence. Smaug speaks eloquently, plays psychological games with Bilbo, and displays both terrible anger and calculating cunning. Tolkien drew on the dragon from Beowulf but made Smaug more sophisticated, a creature who enjoys conversation and verbal sparring as much as destruction. The name Smaug comes from the Old German smågen, meaning to squeeze through a hole, which Tolkien connected to the Germanic Smaug meaning dragon, creating a name that sounds appropriately reptilian and dangerous. The book's pacing reflects its origins as a bedtime story told in installments to children. Chapters end on cliffhanger or at natural stopping points. Each segment is roughly the same length, and the tone remains engaging without becoming too dark or scary. Even the most dangerous moments, the spiders, the dragon, the battle, are handled with a lightness that keeps the story appropriate for younger readers while still maintaining genuine tension. This balance between adventure and accessibility is part of why The Hobbit has remained a children's classic while also appealing to adult readers who appreciate its depth and craft. The theme of riddles and names carries weight throughout the book. Bilbo wins his life by asking riddles, defeats spiders by taunting them with names, and avoids revealing his real name to Smaug, understanding instinctively that names carry power. This reflects ancient magical traditions where knowing someone's true name gives you power over them, a concept found in mythology worldwide. Bilbo's riddling titles, Barrel Rider, Ring Winner, Lucky Number, protect him while revealing just enough to intrigue Smaug, a delicate dance of language that could mean life or death. The book has never gone out of print since 1937, an extraordinary achievement for any work of literature. It's been translated into more than 60 languages, from Spanish to Japanese to Hebrew, with each translation facing unique challenges in rendering Tolkien's invented names, poems, and linguistic wordplay. Some translators kept the names as they were, while others adapted them to reflect equivalent meanings in their languages. The global reach of The Hobbit demonstrates that its themes, courage, home, greed, friendship, transformation, resonate across cultural boundaries. Film adaptations brought The Hobbit to new audiences, though Peter Jackson's three-film adaptation, 2012 to 2014, expanded the relatively short book into 9 hours of film, adding material from Tolkien's appendices and inventing new plot threads. The films divided audiences. Some appreciated the visual spectacle and emotional depth added to certain characters, while others felt the additions diluted Tolkien's simple, elegant story. And so we return to where we began, to a comfortable hobbit hole, to a respectable hobbit who chose adventure over comfort, to a ring found in darkness, and to a journey that changed everything. Bilbo Baggins learned that the world is larger and stranger than the Shire, that courage lies hidden in unexpected places, that mercy can change the course of history, and that coming home doesn't mean everything returns to how it was. He learned, as Gandalf told him, "You are not the hobbit that you were." None of us are unchanged by our journeys, by the roads we walk and the choices we make, by the friends we lose and the treasures we find. The Hobbit reminds us that adventures aren't always what we expect, that the smallest person can change the world, that home is worth fighting for even when we've outgrown it, and that the most precious treasures aren't always gold and gems. Sometimes they are memories of mountains in starlight, of songs sung in elven halls, of loyalty that endures beyond death, of a wizard's friendship, and of the knowledge that we're capable of more than we ever imagined. Bilbo returned to his books and his garden, to his comfortable chair and his pipe, but he carried Middle-earth in his heart forever, and through his red leather book, he shared that world with all who came after Sleep Now, and dream of hobbit holes with round green doors, of paths that wind through ancient forests, of mountains that touch the sky, of dragons sleeping on treasure, of riddles in the dark, of eagles that fly higher than imagination, and of the peaceful knowledge that in every ordinary soul might live an extraordinary heart, waiting only for the right adventure to call it forth. The story is told, the journey complete, and though Bilbo's adventure ended, the road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began, and we all walk our own paths, carrying our own precious things, becoming in the walking not the people we were, but the people we were meant to be. Final soft fade into silence.